It started with a voice, a weak and shaking voice, transmitted through the cold silence of space. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't proud. It was desperate. The Valkyrie people had sent out their final call, a message that was not meant to reach kings or empires, but just someone, anyone. Their world was dying. The air was toxic in most cities. Oceans had boiled dry. Crops were failing. Raiders attacked what little was left. The Valkyrie didn't want war. They didn't want dominance. They only wanted to survive. They had always trusted the Galactic Council, thinking help would come. But when they begged for food, they got silence. When they asked for shelter, they got excuses. And now, when their last remaining cities were collapsing into chaos, they sent one last message into the stars. A whisper in the void. Please, help us, anyone. The Council received the signal, of course. They received everything. But the planet was labeled a Class 9 death world, a place not worth investing resources in. It had deadly weather, dangerous wildlife, and unstable tectonics. Helping would be too risky, too expensive, and most importantly, unprofitable. So they ignored it, and the Valkyrie accepted their fate. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the orbital satellites, old and nearly dead, picked up movement. Not from a council ship, not from any of the known fleets. It was a dark object, triangular in shape, moving fast, far too fast to be a standard cargo vessel. Its engines burned blue, but cold. Its shape was sharp, almost like a blade flying through space. No one knew what it was. It didn't respond to hails. It didn't answer to codes. It was human. The Valkyrie had heard of humans. The stories were strange and confusing. Some racers said they were monsters, born from another kind of deathworld and, even worse one, labeled Class 15. Others claimed they were just myths. No one really knew them. They stayed quiet most of the time, watching, learning, but never getting involved, never sending ambassadors or building alliances, just observing. So why were they here now? Panic broke out in the capital. Citizens flooded the streets. Military leaders debated action, but they didn't have weapons strong enough to shoot it down. Scientists tracked the object's descent. It wasn't slowing down like a normal landing craft. It was headed straight for the most uninhabitable part of the planet, the Firelands, a region of black volcanoes, acidic storms, and lava rivers. Nothing lived there. Nothing survived. Then the sky tore open. The object entered the atmosphere. Like a falling god, a long trail of fire followed it. The earth shook. Glass shattered. The Valkyrie watched from screens, eyes wide with fear. When it hit the surface, there was no explosion, just a deep, cracking impact that echoed across the land. For a while, there was silence. The ruling council of the Valkyrie met in an emergency session. Some believed it was an attack. Others thought it was a crashed ship. A few even hoped it might be aid, but no one believed that for long. It didn't look like any kind of help. It looked like a weapon. They sent a scout team, a group of 10 volunteers, equipped with hazard suits and emergency signals. They traveled for 2 days across dangerous terrain to reach the crash zone. What they found didn't look like a ship. It looked like something built for war. Massive, silent, metallic skin scorched from re-entry. It stood half buried in stone, like a creature pausing after a long sleep. It had no windows, no doors, just armor, as if designed to survive anything, even the end of the world. The team approached slowly. Instruments scanned it. No signs of life. no signals. Just one thing: the surface was healing itself. Metal was moving, sealing cracks, reshaping panels. It was regenerating. Then, out of nowhere, the ground shook again. A rock slide came down from a nearby cliff. One of the scouts' young, barely trained, slipped and fell toward a pit of burning gas. The others screamed, and then it moved. The war machine, or whatever it was, shifted. A long arm extended from its side with impossible speed. It grabbed the falling scout, pulled her back, and placed her gently on the ground. Everyone froze. It hadn't made a sound. No warning, no attack. It had just saved her. Back at the capital, the footage sent by the scouts caused even more confusion. Why would a war machine rescue one of them? Why would it risk exposing itself to danger? Was it programmed that way? Was it even aware of what it was doing? More days passed. The machine began to move. Not fast, not aggressively. It started clearing the area around it, melting lava flows, redirecting acid rivers, and building strange towers from rock and steel. It wasn't building weapons. It was shaping the environment. It was terraforming. But still, it didn't speak. Not a word, no messages, no signs of communication from humanity. The Valkyrie sent out more hails, even tried to reach human frequencies. Nothing came back. That silence was worse than any threat. It meant this wasn't diplomacy. This wasn't a mission of mercy. This wasn't charity. Whatever it was doing it alone. Still, some Valkyrie began to hope. Maybe, just maybe, the humans had heard them. Maybe they had sent this machine to help. Maybe humans didn't send people because they couldn't survive here. Maybe this was their answer, but others were not convinced. Military officers warned that this could be the first step of invasion. What if the machine wasn't saving them, but preparing the world for human colonization? What if the Valkyrie were just in the way? So, they kept watching. One night, a senior engineer, an old Valkyrie named Tavarin, stood on a ridge watching the machine from a distance. He had lived through 5 disasters and 3 evacuations. He had lost his family to starvation and disease. And yet, as he stood there watching this silent monster tear open the land and reshape it with glowing arms of light, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Wonder, he whispered to the wind. You heard us, didn't you? You strange creatures from the stars. You didn't send speeches. You didn't send kindness. You sent power. The next morning, the first water well opened where the machine had drilled. Clean, drinkable. From under volcanic rock. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a miracle. It was action. And somehow, it was more comforting than any words could have been. The Valkyrie didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning. The machine was far more than it appeared. It wasn't just built to survive the world, it was built to fight it, to stand against storms, fire, and time, to push back against extinction with cold steel and relentless will. Because that's what humanity had learned on their own death world. That survival didn't come from kindness. It came from strength, from machines that didn't break, from decisions that didn't wait for approval. And in that moment, even though they hadn't met a single human, the Valkyrie began to understand the kind of people they were. They hadn't sent aid. They had sent a weapon for hope. The war machine did not move like something alive. It moved like something built for a purpose, precise, powerful, and completely silent. Every step it took on the surface of the firelands shook the ground slightly, but not with violence. It wasn't attacking. It was observing, scanning, and working. The Volcari scouts, still stationed near the crash zone, watched it from a distance, unsure what to make of it. The young scout who had been saved by the machine had returned to the capital, and she told everyone what she had seen. It caught me mid-air. Like it knew I would fall, she said again and again. Her words spread like wildfire. People who had once feared the machine now looked at it differently. Was it truly sent to destroy, or had it been sent to save? But even hope came with fear. More teams were sent to observe, each carrying better equipment. They studied the metal body of the machine from afar. It was covered in layered armor, but not the kind used in space battles. This was something different, meant to survive the worst conditions of a planet, not just weapons. Its arms were not designed to carry guns. Instead, they carried tools, heavy, multi-jointed limbs that could lift stones, drill holes, build structures, and it had drones, tiny, spider-like machines began to emerge from its body. At first, the Volcari thought these were weapons, but they didn't attack. Instead, they spread out across the nearby terrain, collecting soil, taking air samples, measuring energy from deep underground. They worked with purpose. The war machine, it seemed, was not alone. It was the center of a network, and now that network was growing. The firelands, once deadly and chaotic, slowly started to change. Ash clouds began to disappear. The rivers of lava were redirected into cooling chambers made of hard black stone. The air became less toxic. The machine built barriers against acidic winds, planted anchors into the ground to stabilize shaking land, and even carved out trenches to drain dangerous gas pockets. The Valkyrie watched all this with disbelief. For decades, no one had ever gone into the firelands and come out alive. Now, this machine was walking through them like it was just another day's work. Still, the biggest question remained: why had the humans sent this thing? They had not responded to any signals. Not from the Valkyrie government, not from the Science Council, not from the few private channels still working. There were no messages, no instructions, no official word. Humanity had given nothing except this machine, and this silence began to worry many leaders. What if this is just the beginning of invasion? Asked Commander Rencor, one of the few remaining military officers. They could be testing their technology here before moving on to bigger targets. But it hasn't hurt anyone, replied Tavrin, the elder scientist who had first witnessed the machine's actions. It's doing more for us than the Council ever did. Others thought it was a trap. Some believed it had a secret weapon inside, one that would activate once the Valkyrie came too close. Suspicion and fear returned like old friends, so the government decided on a controlled test. They sent another scout team, this time with military protection, to approach the machine directly. The team was ordered not to attack, only observe, and if possible, try to make contact. The soldiers carried signal beacons that could emit a universal language pattern used by most advanced species. It was risky, but they had to try. The team arrived at the edge of the machine's current working zone, a flattened area where it had built massive structures that looked like fusion towers and cooling vents. The sky above this area was clearer than anywhere else on the planet. The air was thick, but breathable with light filters. As the team approached, the machine stopped moving. Its body stiffened like it had entered a defensive stance. The soldiers froze. The machine scanned them. For one terrifying moment, its upper section rotated, revealing a deep core that glowed with blue light. It looked like a weapon. One of the soldiers reached for his blaster in fear, But before he could even raise it, the core dimmed. The machine turned away. It ignored them. The team set down their beacons and activated the signal. A repeating pattern of greetings, in over 300 languages, began to echo through the valley. The machine did nothing. For hours, they waited. Nothing changed. Eventually, the team had to retreat due to toxic winds. When they left, the machine resumed its work as if nothing had happened. This left everyone confused. Why would it respond to a falling scout, but not to direct contact? Back in the capital, people argued. Some said it was just following a program. Others believed it was a living AI, acting by its own will. A few even suggested that it was not ignoring them, but simply choosing not to speak yet. Then something strange happened. One of the drones, a small silver orb, flew all the way from the Firelands to the outskirts of a Valkyrie village. The people panicked, but the drone did not attack. It landed near a broken water system. The pipes were rusted and dead, useless for years. The drone began repairing it. Not only that, it improved it. Within a day, clean water flowed through the village. The drone didn't stay. It left as silently as it came. But the message was loud and clear. The machine was expanding its range. Village after village began receiving similar visits. Repair drones would arrive without warning, fix what was broken, and vanish. It wasn't rebuilding everything, only what was critical to survival. Water, power, medical access. But it still said nothing. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council noticed what was happening. They had ignored the Valkyrie source, but they could not ignore human military hardware operating on a council-labeled Deathworld. A few observers were sent. When they scanned the machine, they were alarmed. It was heavily armed, not with traditional weapons, but with something more dangerous: adaptive tools. The machine could shift its arms into drills, cutters, energy displacers. Its armor adjusted to temperature and pressure. It had shields that could absorb blasts and turn them into fuel. To the Council, this wasn't aid, it was a threat, so they sent a patrol fleet. 5 cruisers arrived in orbit above the Valkyrie planet. Their message was clear: withdraw the machine or face consequences. But they didn't send this message to the Valkyrie. They sent it to human space. And once again, humanity gave no reply. No ambassador, no statement, nothing. So the Council ordered a warning: strike not on the machine, but near it. A small plasma burst fired from orbit landed a kilometer away from the machine's current position, just enough to show strength, just enough to send a message. The machine didn't move. But then, from underground, 6 spike towers rose from the earth around it. They formed a dome of light, and within seconds, a pulse shot upward into orbit. It wasn't a weapon. It was a shield. A planetary defense field, covering nearly 200 square kilometers. The Council fleet tried scanning it again, but their instruments were blocked. One ship attempted to descend lower, just to test range. It was instantly locked by targeting beams. No. Shots were fired, but the warning was understood. The Council backed off. This was not a simple machine anymore. This was a guardian, a protector, and most frightening of all, it was acting without permission. The Valkyries saw everything. For the first time in living memory, someone had stood between them and the Council's power. Not with words, but with presence, with strength. The fear was still there, of course. They still didn't know what this machine truly was, but slowly they began to realize it hadn't attacked anyone. It had only defended the helpless. It had saved a scout. It had protected villagers. It had warned the powerful to stay away. And it was doing all this while humanity stayed silent. Tavarine stood again on the ridge where he first saw the machine. This time, his granddaughter stood with him. She pointed at the growing towers in the distance and asked, why didn't the humans come themselves? He looked at her, then at the machine, and answered, because maybe they knew they wouldn't survive here. So they sent something that could. What is it? She asked. Tavarine paused, then replied with a quiet voice, it's a war machine, but maybe it's a prayer in armor. The girl didn't fully understand, but she didn't need to. She saw the skies clearing, the rivers flowing again, and the fear fading. And even though they still hadn't met a single human, the Valkyrie were beginning to understand them. When they heard a cry for help, they didn't send a speech. They didn't send a fleet. They sent something stronger. They sent a war machine to save what was left. The war machine kept working. Days turned into weeks. The firelands began to change shape. The skies above the planet cleared slowly, and the deadly smoke that once choked the Valkyrie lands was now thinning. Valleys once filled with lava were now cooled and turned into stone basins. The machine was rebuilding, not destroying. But the question still remained. Why? The Valkyrie had tried to contact it. They had sent signals, beacons, words in hundreds of languages, even music, but it never replied. No voice, no hologram, no sign of human contact. Just the machine, working. That silence started making people uneasy. It was helping them, yes. It was rebuilding broken systems. It had restored 6 water purification plants, repaired half-destroyed shelters, and even decontaminated soil that had been dead for years. But still, no explanation. And that silence, that heavy silence, was starting to feel dangerous. Many leaders in the Valkyrie government were now divided. One group believed the humans had sent the machine to help, but they didn't know how to communicate. Maybe their systems were different. Maybe they didn't believe in words, only in action. But the other group was afraid. What if this was a plan? What if humans were using their suffering to test their war machine? To learn how it would behave on a real-world death world? Maybe this wasn't kindness. Maybe it was an experiment. This fear grew worse when the Council returned. 5 Council ships appeared in orbit. They hadn't helped when the Valkyrie cried for aid. But now, when a human weapon arrived and started changing the world, they came quickly. These ships weren't rescue vessels. They were Enforcers' military ships with high-powered weaponry and trained crews. They had come not to ask, but to warn. They sent a direct message to the Valkyrie Council. This human machine is unauthorized. You are forbidden to accept support from unregistered powers. Prepare for withdrawal or face consequences. The Valkyrie were stunned. When their people were dying, no one cared. But now that someone was saving them, suddenly it was a problem. Message was clear. The Council didn't care about them. They only cared about control. But the Valkyrie didn't have the power to defy them. Their military was too weak. Their systems were broken. And they feared that if they resisted, the Council would use them as an example, race them to remind others what happened when rules were broken, so they did the only thing they could. They begged the machine to respond. For 3 days straight, Valkyrie scientists and engineers camped outside the war machine's main zone. They used lights, waves, movement, and coded signals. They tried to make shapes on the ground, created art, showed memories of their people dying. They even sent a child, one of the orphans from the broken villages. to walk near the machine holding a white flag. The machine did nothing. It never stopped working. But then, when council ships prepared to descend to the surface, the machine acted. A low hum spread through the air. The ground vibrated. Then, 6 giant towers rose from under the surface. They glowed blue and formed a dome over the entire zone where the machine operated. A defensive shield, pure energy. Nothing could get in, nothing could get out. The council ships sent another warning. They demanded that the machine lower the shield. No reply, so one ship fired a small warning shot, aiming it far from the cities. Just a show of power, not a direct attack. The moment the shot hit the outer edge of the planet, the machine reacted again. From deep underground, a beam of light shot straight into the sky. It wasn't a weapon. It didn't hit the ship. But it passed close enough that the ship's systems went into emergency mode. They backed off immediately. A new message came not from the machine, but from deep space, encrypted, direct, and terrifyingly short. This planet is under protection. Do not return. No name, no identification. But the council knew exactly who it was from. Humanity. The message spread fast, not just through Valkyrie channels, but through the entire interstellar network. Everyone began talking about it. The humans had spoken, but not through politicians or ambassadors. Not with talks or deals. They had sent a warning. The council panicked. No one had ever seen humans act this openly. For years, they had remained quiet, watching, studying. No one had even been sure how many systems they controlled. But now, without invitation, they had entered a death world and drawn a line. Everyone was asking the same question. Why? And what was this war machine really? Back on the surface, the Valkyrie began to change the way they looked at the machine. Before, they had seen it as a powerful thing, yes, but something separate, something cold. Now, they saw it differently. They saw it standing between them and a great power that had abandoned them. It hadn't spoken, but it had answered. A strange kind of trust began to grow. In the villages it had repaired, people began leaving gifts near its structures. Food, ornaments, art. Children drew pictures of the machine as a giant protector with glowing eyes and arms of light. In one city, they carved a statue of it tall, with its shield raised high, and in quiet homes, the old began to whisper prayers to it, not as a god, not as a monster, but as something that had listened when no one else did. Yet still, some didn't trust it. They said, it's still a weapon. One day it may turn. And others replied, maybe, but at least it came. The council ships left orbit in silence. They didn't want to fight. Not with humans. Not now, but something was different after that. The council didn't send help, but they sent spies. Small stealth probes were dropped in different parts of the planet. One of them reached near the machine's territory and tried to hide underground. It was cloaked, invisible to most sensors. The machine detected it in less than 10 minutes. One of the drones flew out, located the device, and disabled it. Not destroyed, disabled. Carefully, like it was saying, I see you. Try again, and it will be different then. It sent another message into space. Let them live, or we will come. That message was heard not only by the council, but by every empire and race nearby. They realized the truth. This wasn't just a machine. This was a statement, a sign of what humanity valued. They didn't send speeches. They didn't send medicine. They didn't send armies. They sent a single war machine, silent, unshakable, merciless to enemies. and compassionate to the weak. And somehow, that was more terrifying than any army. The Valkyrie, though, stopped being afraid. One night, a young girl who had lost her family to starvation walked up to the edge of the machine's zone. She sat on a rock, quietly crying. She didn't expect anyone to see her, but a drone flew down. It sat beside her. It didn't speak. It just projected a small hologram. It was of her village rebuilt, her parents smiling, her brother running. Through the fields. It wasn't real. It was an old memory, taken from a satellite scan. But it was the last image she had of them before everything went dark. She smiled. The drone left without a sound. Somehow, in that moment, she understood the humans better than anyone else. They didn't believe in talking. They believed in showing. They didn't trust promises. They built shields. They didn't come as heroes. They came as guardians. And the Valkyrie finally understood. When humans heard their cry for help, they didn't send mercy. They sent something stronger than mercy. They sent a war machine with a soul. The war machine had become a part of the Valkyrie world now. It no longer felt like an outsider. It moved across the broken surface of their planet like it had always belonged. Wherever it went, destruction stopped. Fires died. Storms calmed. Even the wild beasts that once roamed the death zones seemed to keep their distance, as if they too respected the presence of something far greater. But even with all these changes, the biggest questions still haunted the Valkyrie. Why was it here? Why? Did it choose them? And why did humans, of all species, send a war machine instead of people? The Valkyrie scientists worked day and night, trying to find the answers. They had collected data from the machine's drones, recorded its energy signals, and studied its behavior, but it was so advanced, so far beyond their technology, that most of it didn't make sense. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. A small group of engineers were studying the base of one of the machine's defensive towers when they noticed a hidden panel so well camouflaged that it looked like part of the wall. One of them reached out and touched it. A quiet vibration passed through the air. The panel opened. Inside, there wasn't a weapon or a trap. There was a data core, glowing orb of white and blue light, suspended in magnetic fields. The scientists backed away, unsure what they had just found. But the orb did something they never imagined. It activated, and it spoke, not in sound, but through holograms. Images began to appear in front of the engineers, moving pictures, strange symbols, and audio in a language that none of them understood. They quickly brought the core to a secure facility. It was too important to leave in the field. For the next few days, the top scientists worked non-stop to decode the language. Slowly, they began to recognize a pattern. The holograms weren't random. They were logs, messages left behind by whoever had created the war machine. Not from the present, but from the past. It was a recording, a message from the humans. It started with an image of Earth blue, green, full of clouds. Then the screen changed. Volcanoes erupted. Ice caps melted. Cities flooded. Wildfires burned entire continents. The planet had become a death world. Then came the wars, humans fighting each other for food, water, survival. Weapons unlike anything the Valkyrie had seen. Entire cities turned to ash, skies black with smoke. For hundreds of years, humanity had suffered, not because of aliens or invaders, but because of their own world. It had tried to kill them, and they had survived. The next part of the log showed the early machines first made for battle. then adapted for survival. They were not just weapons. They were workers, protectors, engineers. They could build shelters in storms, extract water from sand, melt snow into rivers, and stand against radiation. These machines were humanity's last hope, and the war machine that now stood on the Valkyrie planet was one of them. Its name was SAVR-17 short for Survival Adaptive Vehicle, Recon-Class. It was never meant to invade. It was never designed to rule. It was born from desperation, built to protect what remained of life in a dying world. And then the last part of the log played. A voice, calm, tired, and filled with something deeper than hope. A human voice. If you are hearing this, then we heard your cry. We understand what it means to ask for help and hear only silence. We once shouted into the dark too. No one came, so we built something that could go where we couldn't. Something that could survive what we couldn't. You don't have to thank us. You don't have to trust us. Just survive. That's all. The room was silent. No one spoke for a long time. The Valkyrie scientists looked at each other, stunned. Their eyes were wet. Even the coldest of them felt a deep ache in their chest. This wasn't just technology. This wasn't a weapon. It was humanity's message. Their answer to pain. Their gift born from suffering. That same night, the Valkyrie broadcasted the log to every region of their planet. People gathered around screens, projectors, and public squares to watch it. Elders wept. Children held their parents tightly. For the first time, they understood why the machine had come. It had come not because the humans wanted power, but because they didn't want anyone else to suffer as they had. After the log was released, something shifted in the hearts of the Valkyrie people, who once feared the machine now bowed in respect when they saw it from afar. Villagers began carving symbols of the SAVR into stone walls, teaching children about it like a legend. Farmers sang songs as they worked near its towers. The machine, though still silent, had become a symbol. But even with the truth now known, the council was not pleased. The log reached their ears to count, and they were furious. Humans had interfered in council matters. They had violated laws. They had placed military-grade technology on a restricted planet, and yet the council couldn't move. They were scared, because now everyone knew that humans hadn't attacked anyone. They had responded to a distress call, and they had done what the council would not. If the council moved against the Valkyrie now, the whole galaxy would see them as heartless tyrants. Still, the council didn't give up. Instead of war, they turned to something worse. Politics. They began spreading rumors that the machine had secret weapons, that it would one day turn against the Valkyrie, that it was only pretending to help. They claimed that humanity had programmed it to gain trust and then take over. The fear returned. Some Valkyrie began to believe these lies. Protests broke out. People demanded the machine be shut down. Others defended it, calling it their only real ally. Tension rose. One day, a group of extremists decided to act. Believing they were saving their people, they snuck into one of the machine's outer towers and placed an explosive charge. Their goal was to trigger a reaction, to force the machine to reveal its true nature. The bomb exploded. The tower collapsed, and then something unbelievable happened. The machine didn't attack. Instead, it sent drones not to punish, but to rescue. The explosion had caused fires in a nearby village. The drones put them out. They evacuated the wounded. They repaired the broken pipes and brought food and water. The Valkyrie were shocked. The very thing they tried to destroy was still saving them. The extremists were caught. Not by the machine, but by the villagers themselves. They were brought to justice, not because they damaged a machine, but because they had betrayed the one thing that had helped them when no one else would. After that, the fear faded again. More and more people began to travel to the rebuilt zones to see the SAV engineers. Studied its design, learning from it. Children played near its towers. The machine allowed all of it. As long as no one tried to harm others, it did not interfere. It had no interest in ruling, only protecting over time. The Volcari developed new systems based on the machine's technologies. Their power grids became more efficient. Their water filters were redesigned using the machine's blueprints. Education began to include lessons about Earth, about humans, and about the machine's history. One day, a new broadcast came from deep space. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't encrypted. It was a simple message from human space. Status, SAV-17. Operating within parameters. No extraction required. Continue mission. It meant only one thing. Humanity was still watching. They saw everything. They knew their machine was working, and they trusted it. Trusted the Volcari, even though they had not stepped foot on the planet. Their presence was felt in every healed wound, every rebuilt shelter, every child who now had a future. The SAV had done more than protect the Valkyrie. It had shown them something priceless, that real strength is silent, that mercy can come with steel skin, that sometimes the best way to speak is to act, and so, without knowing the faces of their saviors, without shaking a single human hand, the Valkyrie came to understand the heart of a species born from fire, war, and death, a species that once screamed into the darkness, heard nothing, and built something to scream back. They didn't send words, they sent a war machine, to teach the galaxy what it meant to survive. Years had passed. The skies above the Valkyrie world were no longer black. The deadly storms were rare now, and the air, once poisonous, had grown cleaner. Forests had started returning to the lands, small and young but green. Rivers that had dried into cracked bones of dust were flowing again. Where fire once ruled, now villages stood, built with new strength, new hope, and always under the watchful eye of the machine. The war machine, SAV-17, had not stopped working. It had no need for rest, no desire for power, and no voice to shout what it had done. It moved like it always did come, strong and unshaken. Its drones still patrolled the skies, checking for damage, repairing what needed help. But something had changed. The Volcari were no longer afraid. Children played near the energy towers now. Artists painted murals of the machine some showed it like a hero from legends. Others showed it as a symbol of rebirth. Elders sat in its shadow, telling stories of the day it came from the sky like a falling mountain. To the people of this once fallen world, the war machine was not just metal and power. It was memory, it was protection, and for many, it was mercy given shape. The Galactic Council had not forgotten about it. Their spies still circled in distant orbits, watching. They had tried to spread fear, tried to twist the story, but the truth had become too loud to silence. Because this machine had done what the entire Galactic Council refused to do. It listened and it acted. No army, no politics, just action. One day, something different happened. A large object appeared in orbit above the Valkyrie world. At first, everyone feared the Council had returned with new force. But it wasn't them. The signal was old but powerful. The code it carried was unmistakable. It was human. For the first time in all these years, a human ship was arriving. The whole planet seemed to pause. Cities sent up telescopes, scanners, messages, greetings, but no reply came. The ship simply moved into a low orbit and released a single shuttles, silver with engines that hummed like a song. It descended slowly through the clouds, crossing the green fields, the rocky mountains, and finally the edge of the Firelands, where it landed. Near the SAVR, the Valkyrie gathered in thousands. Some came to watch, others came to welcome. Some came simply to see a real human with their own eyes. And then the door opened. Only one person stepped out, a man, old, tall, wearing a simple suit. No guards, no weapons, no flags or titles, just a tired face and a calm walk. He had kind eyes and hands that looked like they had built more than they had. Destroyed, he walked straight toward the SAVR. The machine turned. Slowly, it looked at him through its glowing lens, but it didn't move. To stop him, it recognized him. He placed a hand on its surface. "You did good," he whispered. There was no reply. But something in the way the machine pulsed, something in the way its light shifted, made it feel like it heard. Then the man turned to face the crowd. "I'm not here to rule," he said. "I'm not here to take anything. I came to see what hope looks like." The Valkyrie waited in silence. He continued, "Long ago, we screamed for help. No one answered, so we built something that could, not with words, with will. And when you screamed, we heard it." He looked around at the children in the front row, at the elders behind them, at the towers standing like guardians on the horizon. "You don't need us anymore. That's good. That means the machine worked." A young Valkyrie girl stepped forward. She had flowers in her hand, blue petals from a plant that had returned thanks to the Sava's restoration systems. She walked up to the man and offered them. He took the flowers and smiled. "You kept going. That's all we hoped for." He didn't stay long. He visited a few towns, sat with the engineers who had studied the SAVR systems, listened to songs that had been written about the machine. One child gave him a drawing of the Earth and the Valkyrie planet, side by side, with a giant machine standing between them holding both in its arms. The man said, "Thank you." Then he left. No speech, no deal, no claim. The humans had not come to be heroes. They had come to witness the result of what they had sent in their place, a war machine with a mission not to destroy, but to protect. When the ship rose back into orbit, the whole world watched. The skies were blue that day, the same skies that had once burned with fire and acid. When the ship disappeared into the stars, something remained, not the man, not the technology, but the truth, that real help doesn't always come with banners or trumpets. Sometimes it comes with silence, with steel, with sacrifice. The SAVR-17 remained. It would never leave. It had been given a task, and it would complete it, even if it took forever. Its memory core stored everything, every saved life, every rebuilt home, every healed wound. One day, when all was safe, it might power down. But until then, it would stand watch, just as it had from the beginning. The young Valkyrie girl who had once seen the drone show her a hologram of her family grew up. She became a scientist, then a leader. And when she spoke to her people, she always began with the same words. When we cried into the darkness, the council gave us silence, but the humans, they gave us something better. She would point toward the horizon where the towers still glowed. They gave us a war machine, And those listening would nod not in fear, but in pride, because they had learned something powerful. Mercy doesn't always wear a smile. Sometimes it wears armor. Sometimes it speaks not with a voice, but with protection. And sometimes it doesn't come with a promise. It simply arrives and refuses to let you die. The war machine had not saved everyone with soft hands. It had saved them with strength, with systems that never stopped, with patience, with power, with a message in its silence. We heard you, you mattered. Now survive, and so the Volcari did, with machines, with their own hands, with the wisdom passed to them by an ancient weapon that once fell from the sky quiet cold, and shining with a strange kind of love, not human love, but something deeper, something built from pain, and forged into steel, and the galaxy, slowly, began to understand. The humans never sent an army. They never sent aid. They sent something far more terrifying. They sent hope, in the shape of a war machine.